Welcome everybody, Shiur number 630. We're learning today Le'ilei Nishmas Moshe Doi ben Rabban Ziza, Le'ilei Nishmas Blima Basra Moshe, and Yitzchak Yosef ben Miriam Molka should finally be Magzil Shuva. Getting back to our malacha of KOSHAIR tying. So we ended off last time, we went through the Mechab, the Ramah in general. There's more to go through over there. It's a long sif in Siman, Shin, Yud, Zayin. Sif Aleph is fairly large. Usually in general, how the Shulchan Aruch, it's important to keep in mind how the Shulchan Aruch sets it up in the Lamates Malachas, especially in the beginning of a Siman, the first sif will usually be the main klalim. That's where usually you'll find the main categories of the Malacha. So it's important to keep in mind, well, one is learning HILCHOS SHABBOS inside, that to stress on the first sif in the siman usually is where all the klalim are, most of them, not all the time, but most of them, and then the sifim, after that come the pratim, the various different cases. So in Siman Shin Yud Zayin, which is our sif that talks about tying and untying, it's a very large sif aleph, and then after, which explains all the categories, the klalim, and then after that comes Beis, Gimel, Dalet, and so on, whereby the various different examples. Okay, so I just want to go through some various examples. So the bottom line is, when the dust settles right now, we see that whether it's a kesher uman, a professional knot, or whether it's a kesher shel kayama, a permanent knot, and we saw what the word permanence means, meaning there was a machlokes. Some say up to 24 hours. In other words, as long as you could open it within 24 hours, that's not considered a permanent knot. More than 24 hours, it's permanence. And others want to say as long as you could open it within a week, within 7 days, it's not considered permanent. And permanence is only when it's more than a week. Okay, in general, we try and stick to the 24-hour period. In general, need be, we could rely on the 1 week. The poskim that say 1 week b'shas hadchak. But again, we have to see each case individually, because again, we're taking into play that Maisa Uman also is a problem, Kesher Uman also is a problem. So whether it's the professional knot or whether it's the permanent knot, they're both a problem. It's just a question of a deraisa or midrabanan. Okay, so we want to go through some various different examples and see how it applies. Now, the only time that a knot in general would be mutter, which we're going to get to those examples too, again, is if it's not professional, it's not a considered quote-unquote a Maisa Uman, a halachic craftsman's knot, which we saw double knots are and the knots at the end of the strings are. So it's not considered a craftsman's knot, for example, and there is no permanence. So it would have to be a simple man's knot, a halachic simple man's knot, a Maisa Hedyet, which Kesher Hedyet, and not a Kesher Uman, and it would also have to be with the intention of less than 24 hours in order for it to be mutter all the way through. That's the general, crux of it in general, of the concept of what we're talking about and what is mutter, what is not, and what is asr midrabanan, and what is asr min haTorah. Okay, I just want to go through some examples before we get to some more klalim. We have to talk about the bow, and bow on top of a knot also, and in reference to tying shoes, shoelaces, how to tie it, and so on. But of course, there's a lot more to talk about with all those in Yonim, but I want to just give some examples in reference to how we see both the craftsman's knot, Maisa Kesher Uman, and the Kesher Shal Kayama are both asa. So we have, first of all, brings on the Sefer Lamates Malachas, a very standard case on page 787, and that is a tzitzis. Somebody has regular tzitzis. One has to be extremely careful, a man, obviously. Irregular tzitzis, and of course an irregular talus cut in a small talus, and a talus gadol, a large talus, when checking their tzitzis, not to tighten the knots. He says like this: tying or tightening any of the sets of tzitzis, knots that may become loose over the passage of time, would taka be asa to do on Shabbos. And he explains, just before we even get to the tzitzis, just real quickly on page 786, he says like this, as a Sefer Lamates Malachas, that a knot that is generally made by people to last permanently or indefinitely is considered a full-fledged kesher shal kayama, a permanent knot like we've been talking about, even if it is not a very tight knot. So the tightness makes it into a kesher uman. The fact that the permanence makes it into a kesher shal kayama. So again, even if it's not a very tight knot, a firm knot, it's not a very firm knot, and even if the intention of the person making the knot is it for only to be tied temporarily, but it's longer than a day or longer than a week, depending on the machlokes. So making this type of a knot is the malacha of kosher midrabanan, according to many poskim, or it could be midrabanan, like we said. Okay. And then just simply says, even a simple double knot could be a malacha d'oraisa in certain instances under these conditions, with the permanence and so on. Okay, so getting back to our tzitzis. So again, we could all understand regular tzitzis that's made. We have number one, it's very tight. So we have the permanence as far as not the permanence. We have the tightness as far as the kesher uman. We have the professional knot, and also of course it's going to last. Everybody knows when you make tzitzis, you're doing it on a permanent basis. Anybody who tightens tzitzis or is making tzitzis does have in mind it should last for more than 24 hours, and sometimes even more than a week. It should last, and that's it. Nobody wants their tzitzis to be opened up. So again, tightening tzitzis, regular tzitzis, the knots on tzitzis, whether it's on the top part or the bottom part, it's on the beged part or the hanging part, wherever it is, tightening all those knots would be also to do on Shabbos. And believe it or not, it's an important thing to keep in mind because of the fact, people don't realize they check. It's a good thing, by the way. It is a good thing to check your tzitzis. One should check their tzitzis before Shabbos. I know by myself, it's on the list, of quote-unquote list, our famous list that we always talk about, one should make before Shabbos. We write down that we should check the tzitzis before Shabbos, talis cotton, talis gadol, and so on, and tighten up all the knots, make sure nothing's loose. Like this, one shouldn't come by mistake to tighten them on Shabbos. In other words, a person checks their tzitzis before they daven, usually during the week. Let's say on a regular Shabbos talis, so one is going to go start checking their tzitzis on Shabbos before they daven, which you're allowed to check the tzitzis, but you have to be careful. I had it myself once or twice. You forget, and you give a chop. You pull the tzitzis tight because you're used to tightening the knots. That's not supposed to be done on Shabbos because of the malacha of KOSHAIR tying. Also keeping in mind, some people make a knot at the end of the tzitzis. Sometimes if it's fraying or so, it's preferably not to, but if you do, it's fraying or whatever. So that during the week, that's fine. But one has to be careful on Shabbos, of course, at the top of the string from the tzitzis, of course, not to tie a knot over there either. Of course, that's a permanent knot, and that's a professional knot, like we've spoken about, and that's going to last. So you have kesher shel kayama, you have kesher shel uman, which could be l'chayra deraisa in that case. Again, keeping in mind, when you have both, the Mechaber told us, the Shulchan Aruch told us straight out, if you have both the Kesher Uman, when it falls under the category of craftsman's not Kesher Uman, and also Kesher Shel Kayama, which is more than a day or more than 7 days, depending on that machlokes, it's automatically a deraisa, because then you're going according to all shitas, obviously, you're covering all grounds, as they say. So again, tying these tzitzis knots, so whether at the beginning or the end or the strings themselves, any part of the tzitzis is going into Shaila of a deraisa. Okay, next case, he brings down an interesting case, tying the ends of a hood lace into a knot to prevent the lace from slipping out. In other words, a lot of times a person has a lace in their hood, a lot of times by children, and it slips out and it could pull out, especially little children. Sometimes they pull it out. So one says, you know what, I'll tie a knot at the end of the hood lace. So that, again, the same problem. We mentioned that earlier also, but that could be also taka running into a deraisa, possibly because a person wants that to last. A person wants that to be a kiyum. Again, you have kesher shel kayama. One wants that to last for many weeks throughout the winter, right? I don't want the knot to open. I want it to stay so that the hood won't be pulled out. And that's number one. Number two, it could be a kesher uman, like the Rama was talking about. It could be tying a knot at the end of a string is a question of a kesher uman. Professional knot, so you have a professional knot and the person hasn't mind to have it a long time. So again, that could be a question of a dioraisa. One has to be careful with all these type of strings that come out of, sometimes it comes out of, person has strings on a robe, sometimes on a hood they have the string and they don't want it to be pulled out, sometimes on a pajama pants or something along those lines, so that it doesn't slip out of the hole. They'll make a knot at the end. That is also to do and possibly could be a deraisa. Just one more quick case he brings under the Sefer Lamites Malachas, repairing a snapped pull cord. I'm not so familiar with this, but repairing a snapped pull cord, the cord that's made to pull on curtains, for example, a snapped pull cord from curtains. They want to repair it. So a person might go ahead and do it by tying together with a double knot. So again, that's the same thing. One wants it to last, and a double knot could be kesher uman, like we said, according to the Ramah and so on. So that could also be running into a problem, possibly of a deraisa, but the Rabbanan for sure. So, to make a long story short, brings down the Sefer Lamas Tes Malachas, finishing it off for today. In all of the aforementioned examples, all these various different examples that we just gave, the knots are of a kind that are ordinarily meant to remain indefinitely, although they sometimes come loose over time. But these are knots that are made with a machshava. Somebody has a mind to keep them with a kiyam, with permanence, right? The tzitzis and so on, and the other ones that were all those cases that we just mentioned. They are therefore classified as kesher shel kayama, even if they were not made very tightly. If they're made very tightly, like we said, it runs into kesher shel uman. But even if they were made very tightly, they're running into a kesher shel kayama. So either way, you'll say it's a deraisa, derabbanan. All these knots are also to do. And even if the person who made them was the intention to undo them shortly afterwards, still it's running into a problem because possibly it could be a uman, kesher uman, and so on. Thank you for listening. Aslach and bracha, kol tov.